One of the most common questions I've been asked since starting this channel is whether or not it's okay to use imitation leaf instead of real gold leaf. And my answer is always the same, and that is, of course it is. But I've never used it myself. And for a channel that's run as long as mine, I think it's about time I remedied that and had a look at it. Because although, I'm all about people learning the proper processes, using the best materials possible to sort of get started in a craft that is very endangered, I also want to make it accessible for people. So, the thought of going out and buying a book of gold leaf, trying to make a sign and it going wrong is enough to really sort of put people off carrying on with the craft. So if there is an alternative, to get started for a lot cheaper in a time when everything's much more expensive, I want to give that a look. And I'm going to try and be as thorough as possible because I'm going to be comparing it to real gold leaf. And that's not just the look and the finish, that'll be the processes, the materials used, whether it's the same to work with. So hopefully it's going to be quite a thorough and useful video. So I'm going to start by just looking at the two side by side to see if there's any discernible differences. So that out of the way, let's crack on. Right, so here we've got 23 carat gold leaf and our imitation leaf, and obviously it's quite evident that you get a lot more in terms of size with the imitation leaf. In terms of price, book of this, which is, I think it's 24 sheets, they're 8 centimetres by 8 centimetres. Book of that costs about £33 including tax, but then you'll have to pay delivery, but obviously delivery is going to be the same on anything. So £33, this including tax. This is 14 centimetre sheets, there's 25 of these, and this is about £2.50. So there's huge differences there in both cost and the volume of gold that you get. So let's take a look at it. Right, let's look at genuine gold leaf first. So ignore this little bit, it's because it's a book that I've already used. So I'm just going to put this down on the gilder's cushion and then go through a couple of the properties of this. So first off, this is so thin. You have to be careful breathing around it because you can just, lose everything that you've got on your gilder's cushion by, having a deep breath through your nose. It cuts really nicely, but I'll just show you something that you need to be aware of with this. I'm just going to cut a tiny little bit in the corner. So you can see here, I've cut a little square off that corner. If I touch this, the oils on my skin mean that bit is unusable. Obviously a tiny bit like this doesn't matter, but if you touch your knife blade and then try and cut, that'll just drag that gold leaf, that'll be ruined. Yeah, it's just everything, this is just so delicate that the slightest sort of misstep with it and you could ruin a leaf. So something to bear in mind. And looking at this as it is, it looks quite muted. I hope this light isn't too bright and you can see. Let's just try and block some of that off. But it doesn't look shiny, but this, when it's water gilded, will finish like it will have a mirror finish. So now I'm just going to put something over that so I don't let it blow away. Now let's take a look at the imitation gold. So this is the first time I've looked at this, so I don't know what it's like to work with. I don't even know what it looks like. So let's see. So initially it looks pretty much the same, but that's to be expected. The main thing is going to be what it looks like when it's completely finished and water gilded. So let's see if it's the same process to get this out of the book and onto the cushion. Right. Yep, that's the same. Right, let's give it a little touch test as well. So big, which might seem good, but it's going to be difficult to cut because my knife's barely big enough, so I'll just take a little corner off that. Well, this looks way more tactile, like you could potentially even apply this with your hands, so much heavier. I don't know whether that's going to play a part, because what I want to do is use the exact same processes first as water gilding, just because that's a minimum amount of petroleum jelly, minimum amount of gelatin in the size, and that means you're going to get the nicest finish. But that might not work with this because it's super heavy, so well, that'll be our next test anyway. So let's have a look. We'll move on and try and gild a bit of glass. Okay, so before this, it goes without saying, you've got to have a really clean piece of glass. So I'm not going to go through the cleaning process, but I will show you what I use, and that is this stuff. It's sort of like a chalky block that you sort of rub with water, rub on the glass, and then polish it off with a dry bit of kitchen towel. I've mixed up the size mix that I would ordinarily use for 23 karat gold, and that is 1 diamond of leaf gelatin to half a pint of distilled water. So you put that 1 diamond in there, leave it for 5 minutes to soften up, and then I heat this half pint for 2 minutes. You have to work out your microwave settings, because what you don't want to do is boil it. So if I did that for 2.5 minutes in my microwave, that would boil it. I don't want to boil it. I want that gelatin to sort of just, well, mix into the sort of really hot water, because I think it can sort of ruin the sort of makeup of it if you boil it, and then you can get a sort of streaky effect in your gold. So I'm told anyway. So first thing I'm going to do is put some petroleum jelly on the back of my hand. It's really thin, you just sort of want a sort of thin coating that's then going to charge the gilder's tip so that we can pick up the leaf. So really rub that in. This is the gilder's tip, so give that a couple of wipes and then that's ready to go. So 23 karat gold. I've done plenty of gilding tutorials, so yeah, I'll link those above so that you can have a look at a more in-depth one of how to gild 23 karat gold. You see that's folded a little bit, and then I am a bit shaky handed for this, so give it a little blow instead. So what I'm going to do is just put a sort of around about a half leaf on there. So pick that up like that, and with a very, very saturated gilder's tip, just going to soak this bit of glass. You can't wet this enough. So let's pop this on there, and that's gone on really nicely. So if you do end up getting a few folds, you can sort of run a little bit of the size down. You have to be careful because this can, if you put too much, this can sort of make it slide down with that. So if you can see, that's really flattening that leaf out. Okay, I'm really happy with that. So now let's move on to our imitation gold to see how that goes on, and whether or not we're going to have to mix up some more size, well, and so on and so forth. So this might be quite difficult to cut, but we'll see. No, it's pretty easy actually. So it cuts really nicely. Try and do a bit that's around about the same size until it's about there. Right, let's have a look. Charge the tip. It picks it up. It's a little bit heavier, but we'll go with that because, you know, I want to be able to use the exact same sort of process, just because that's a minimal amount that we need to use. So let's get this on here. looking at that, that doesn't really need any tweaking. Let's just see if it will tweak anyway. So let's just pop a... So you can, yeah. If you needed to sort of get a crease out, then yep, that's the way to do it. So, right, so far so good in terms of not needing to adapt the processes that we're doing for regular gold leaf. But we'll see when this is dried, we'll see how that burnishes and whether it sticks to the glass or not. Okay, so I've given that a decent amount of time to dry, and you see even from the back that there's a considerable difference in the finish. But let's just turn that round so you'd see it from the front of the glass, which is how it would be viewed anyway. So this is obviously going to swap the side that it's on. So this is our imitation leaf, this is our real gold leaf. I think you can see even from my hand in there, you are getting a reflection in here, but you know, this one is much cleaner. It's like it's a mirror finish, and this is sort of a cloudy mirror finish where when you're close up that'll give you a good reflection. As you move away, that's kind of sort of blurred. So still, you know, it's finished pretty well, it's applied really well, which I'm really happy with. So let's just spin this back around, because something that always has to be done no matter what you're using is burnishing. So I'm not sure how clear it is, but you're always going to get, you know, an amount of sort of tiny creases in your leaf that need burnishing out. So I'm going to try that now. So you can make these out of just a micro velvet a burnishing pad, and you're just kind of gently rubbing around to sort of buffer that and get rid of any bits where there might have been folds. Not going too mad, you know, just you'll be able to see what you're doing with this. So now I'm just gonna buffer this one. And not so much happens with this, and I think it's because it's not so delicate. So if there is a fold, which there was here, you can see that's quite evident. And yeah, I didn't know if this would need a second gild. This 100% will. You always do more than one layer with gold leaf, but now I can see that I am going to need to do a second layer with this one, just because where there were these folds, that's taken a little hole out of that. Okay, so I'm glad I did film that second bit, because something unexpected happened, and that is it really didn't like being gilded for a second time, the imitation leaf I mean. So let's see if I can see this in this camera. So look at that, that is way worse than the first time, and that's because no matter how dry it was, and believe me, it was bone dry, it had been sat on the radiator for an hour, it still let some of that size mix through. So it's because of the cracks, and because this is nowhere near as thin as this, it doesn't sort of spread and then become a part of the glass. This sort of sticks to it, and if there's any minute cracks, which I think are inevitable because it's not as thin, they got in, that spreaded this apart, and the second gild went on like that, and it hasn't stretched out. So yeah, that is something that makes it very different to work with, I suppose. You'd have to figure a way around that. So the problems I can see with this, you need to get a perfect gild first time with imitation leaf, which I don't think is that hard. You know, I think you can put it on, you could really sort of keep running the size mix down to get all the creases out. If you don't, they're going to be stuck there. And I don't think you'll be able to do one of the particular methods of reverse painting, which is sealing gold leaf and then rubbing the excess away. And that's simply because this isn't stuck enough to the glass like this. So for those unfamiliar, what we would do, we would get our sign writing enamel or a sort of screen printing ink or a backup paint or something like that. Paint on here, wait for it to dry and then rub away the excess. I just don't think that'll work on here. I think because this isn't stuck properly enough to the glass, obviously putting paint on top of that isn't going to help. It'll just mean it's equally as fragile. So it could be that you need a thicker size mix, which I'm going to try. But for now, I will say this isn't worthless, because what I was able to do was gild this piece of glass exactly the same way as I would if I was gilding with 23 karat gold, ignoring the fact that we can't do the processes afterwards by sealing it and stuff like that. But if you did just want to practice laying gold leaf, this is all right. You know, you're not going to get the same intricacies. It's not as delicate. You know, it's easier to cut. It's not going to matter if you touch it, which I do think is part of the learning process. You know, you've got to learn to be careful around 23 karat gold or any other real gold leaf because of how light and delicate it is. But if you just want to practice using a gilder's tip, applying gold leaf, I think it's probably, yeah, I can see a place for it. So anyway, moving on, I'm going to make a double strength size mix, get another piece of glass, and I'm going to see if I can get a perfect gild, and then we'll try and seal that in and see if we can rub it away. Okay, so I think I've covered enough in terms of following the usual process for gilding, and that I think it is a reasonable enough product for you to practice on. So now, let's say what we want to do is gild this piece of glass and then seal that in with paint and rub it away. So what I'm relying on is a single gild, because I know that we probably can't do a second gild, so I don't want to be burnishing it and I don't want to be applying a second leaf. But I've doubled the strength of the size mix to 2 diamonds of gelatin to half a pint of distilled water. And that might sound a lot, but it isn't. Some people use this for their recipe for normal gilding, and you know, neither of us are right or wrong there. It's whatever works for you. I've just narrowed it down to I want to use as little gelatin as possible while getting, you know, a firm gild, because I just don't want any sort of sediment from that gelatin to be visible. But I mean, it is heavily diluted, so double the strength should be fine. So what I'm going to do is just soak this piece of glass like I've done before, absolutely saturated from top to bottom. But just, I'm not going to bother with a gilder's tip because I know I don't have to. So I'm just going to pick this up and try and apply it with my hands. And that went on really well. Now, I was lucky there. You know, I know that there's going to be times when you apply it and there's a whopping great fold in it. And that is what we use that technique for, you know. So we are, you know, running that liquid down the leaf to sort of get any creases out. And I've probably made it worse because it was all right, but I just want to show you what to do if you have that problem. You can see that's started to slide now because I've put too much size on. I'm just tipping that back, but this is thick. You know, you will be able to move this. That looks quite nice. Let's see if I can see from this angle. I'll bring it over. So it's not too bad. We'll see how it dries. I mean, there's sort of like it's almost like a tarnish line across here, which I don't know what that is because it's not a crease. But I'm going to see how that dries. And in the meantime, while that dries, I want to continue experimenting. So I've got a size mix, I've got gold leaf, I've got imitation gold leaf. I'm just going to pop my light back on. I'm just going to pop this piece aside to dry and use a piece of glue chipped glass. This is a panel I'd made for a video quite a while ago, so And sometimes it might just be handy for one process rather than all of them. So I just want to make sure I try it on this, because I know that glue chipping is the most popular subject on my channel. So I'd certainly want to glue chip a piece, so I'd certainly want to gild a piece of glue chip glass. Okay, so I'm going to do this the same as I've done the last one. I'm going to use a gilder's tip, and whatever gilding you're doing, you really want to be careful not to get any of the size mix on your leaf, because I mean, if that drips onto there, that will go through every single leaf and that'll be a book ruined. Maybe not with the imitation, I don't know, but certainly with real gold leaf, that will go straight through. So yeah, that looks good. So there, that's those creases I was talking about earlier, which we want to kind of get out if we can. Might be a case of turning that upside or on its side. See what we can do from there. So this is strong stuff, man. You can pull this about. I mean, you can't do this with real gold leaf, it just rip apart. You can very, very gently, very slightly, but yeah, if you started being quite rough with it, it would just rip apart. So, right, that's that. I'll pop this back up the other way because I'm going to do a bit of 23 carat gold leaf as well, just so we can show the comparison. Crease that one as well. I'm going to stick with this double size mix as well, because it's not going to make a massive amount of difference, but let's flip that around and try and do a similar thing. You see how delicate that was? That was just a drop that fell on it, and that has made a big hole in it. So yeah, they're night and day in terms of what they're like to work with, in terms of how delicate and accurate you have to be. So with glue chipping, you don't just let it dry. We've got to push that into all of the chipped areas. So using a kind of cotton wool ball and checking as you go that doesn't get too wet, because maybe not on the imitation leaf, but certainly on the real leaf, that will pull it off. Okay, so here's the results of our glue chipped piece. I'm just going to turn my light off because I think it might be easier to see. Might be a little bit grainy, I hope it isn't too bad. But I'll bring this up close. You see what you are left with is creases through the gild, which you can't get rid of. You can't burnish them out. You can't do a second gild. Alright, but up close I just don't like the look of it. I'm a bit annoyed with myself on this one because I put too much petroleum jelly on my gilder's tip. So I used this tip, which is called the thorn tip, which is a very fine mesh, and then if you put too much petroleum jelly on it, it leaves the residue. So if you look in those mirrored areas, that's a little bit annoying. But I mean, hopefully you can still see, you know, the sort of quality comparison. This is 10 times better. So yeah, that's that. I mean, glue chip glass is a bit more forgiving for stuff, obviously, because there's so much going on in the detail. So perhaps if you didn't have to do the mirrored areas, if you were just doing glue chipped glass, it might be all right, but I think you're still seeing those sort of folds that I can't get rid of. Right, so moving back to that piece that I gilded before I started on the glue chip panel, we'll have a look and see how that's turned out. And it's not too bad, to be honest. I think this light's not helping, so I'm just going to turn that off again. but you know, decent reflection in there. Yeah, it's got the sort of imperfections as we'd sort of expect to see, but it's a pretty half decent mirror finish, you know. It does really annoy me that I just don't think I can burnish that, because the sort of cracks are too big that when it leaves a hole, it'll leave an opening for the size mix to run in behind it again. Please, anyone in the comments who's probably got a lot more experience with this than me, please, you know, feel free to correct me. Now, I'm using the techniques I know from applying real gold leaf, so it could be that I've just approached this completely the wrong way, and you know, that's why I'm getting the results I am. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is move on to backing this up and just painting a little design on the back, and then we'll see if once that's dry we can rub away the excess leaf and make something, you know, that looks all right. Okay, so I'm just going to use standard cyanide enamel to just paint a really simple design, and I'm going for simple because I haven't prepped anything, and my freehand painting is pretty crap. So I think I'm just going to do a little, or attempt to do a little skull or something. So just one other thing I thought I'd mention while I do this, and I just wanted to sort of apologise for some of the weird sound in this video, because I process the videos as I make them, because I sort of do half of it on my phone and I haven't got a lot of space on my phone. And as I've been doing it, I've been noticing a few things. One is that the mic has been cutting out only for like a second, but it's a bit jarring when you kind of, you know, just hear these clicks and you can tell that something's been missed. Because it's a Bluetooth mic, which is, yeah, that's why it's losing connection. But secondly, the reason I bought it is because I get a lot of sort of comments about how bad the sound quality on my videos is. So I thought I'll buy a new microphone. So I did, and the sound quality is loads better, but I'm yet to kind of master where I need to place it. So as I've been processing these videos, I just hear myself heavy breathing and just like, oh my god, sounds terrible. So I'm sorry about that. Just me panting down the down the microphone. I've moved it now, so I hope this isn't as bad. But anyway, that was that. I'll try and speed through the rest of this so it's not too boring. Right, so the paint's dry, and before I just try and remove this excess gold, I just wanted to try something else. So I've got these little scratchy tools, and I wanted to see if I could draw some kind of fine detail into the back of this leaf. And I did try it on the piece that I gilded earlier, which I can show you the results of. So there you can see the 23 karat gold. You can get some lovely detail in there. This just ripped apart, and that is largely because it's not adhered properly, you know. So I'm hoping that this double strength size mix does make a difference when it comes to scratching in the background. But you know, I'm not too fussed either way. It's really just I want to make something that looks okay, you know, with this leaf, and I think if I can rub away the excess on this skull, as well as doing some nice sort of shaded details behind it, it would look, you know, half decent. So I've got this, and it's got a kind of sharp metallic point. So let's just start. This might be a complete non-starter. So let's just try and well, the good news is this is doing much better than the other one. So definitely the double strength size does make a difference, but it is still fraying. So Alright, so I'm not so sure how that's going to come out, but that's largely due to my crap drawing rather than the ability to scratch into the back of that, which with this new size mix or double strength size mix, that's fine. You can scratch into the back of it. So I thought I'd give up because it weren't looking too great. So let's move on with trying to remove that excess gold. So I'm just going to use a Q-tip, bit of my glass cleaner, and then just going in the areas that I want to get rid of it, just scrubbing and scrub up to the edge where the paint is. I'm hoping that that paint is, or the leaf is adhered well enough to the glass so that the paint is strong enough to stop it from sort of removing that. And it looks like it is. So that's pretty good. Good start. So I want to just test. The reason I did the teeth on this is because I want to see what it's like in the sort of intricate areas where we might have to be quite rough and just go over the paint quite a lot. So get a lot of that on there. Scrub this all around the teeth, and I think that's doing all right. So it's just a case of yeah, you go through your Q-tips because they get quite mucky quite quick. And this is I'm only using these for the sort of more intricate areas. You know, if you were going to do this over sort of an area that had quite a lot of or sort of bigger gilded areas, you'd just use a damp cloth and then rub that in your glass cleaner. You also use things like kitchen wipes, baby wipes, things like that. They work fine. But it looks like this is working all right. So I'll speed through the rest of that in a time lapse, and then we'll see what that looks like afterwards. Okay, so here's a nice close-up honest look at that, and you can see it's not really a success. So you know, it did remove some of the paint and the gold leaf, and that's just because that gold leaf is sort of stuck to the glass rather than like the 23 karat gold almost becomes a part of it. It's so thin, you know. And I've done this on so many pieces with 23 karat gold and never had this. And don't get me wrong, you could if you overdid it, but I wasn't overdoing it. I was just using the exact same pressure as I would, which isn't very hard, and you know that's sort of come away. Yeah, I do think, you know, some of these drawings don't look too bad, and I don't mean skill wise in drawing, but I mean, you know, you can get sort of nice scratchy fine lines in there, and I think they'd look all right. The leaf itself, yeah, well, let you decide. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've done quite a thorough test, or enough of a test to have an opinion, and here it is. So do I think Imitation Gold Leaf is any good? No, I hate it. I think it's crap, and I would never use it for anything. Do I think it would be a handy thing for people just starting to get used to applying gold leaf? Not really, because although you can pick up leaf with the gilder's tip and apply it to glass, it's not an accurate representation of gold leaf. You know, gold leaf's much more delicate. You can't touch it with your hands. You've got to be careful breathing around it. You're not going to get a feel for that using imitation gold. When it comes to the finish, it's impossible, or not impossible, that's stupid to say for a small test that I've done, but it's very hard to get a nice finish, and it's very easy to get a nice finish with 23 karat gold. Now, even if you apply a leaf terribly and it's got all creases, you can buffer that out, you can burnish it out, you can use your size to kind of try and get rid of any, you know, although it's a delicate thing to work with, it's very forgiving in terms of if you mess up applying it, you can be able to pull that back and make it really nice. With this, I feel like the best you're going to get is a kind of flat but creased and mottled look, and I just don't like it. So, and that is no offense to anyone who uses it. I've seen some people use it and it looks really good, so they're probably doing something that I'm not doing. But as someone who has been working with reverse glass for probably 10 years and tested quite a lot of things, I really don't feel like this is a product that I could recommend to anyone. Yeah, and that's all. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share the vid with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.